From Unity Church of Christianity in Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational Christian church providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress with the Reverend Howard Caesar.
As you know, all of us are on a journey. We share this journey we call life, and I think most of us, I can speak for all of us, are seeking some degree of clarity within ourselves, within our world that we live, and clarity with regard to our God. And I think we're certainly in relationship to some extent with all of these, and like every relationship, we want the relationship to be growing and expanding, to be getting clearer and stronger and more fulfilling. And so I like to think of it as though we all have a window, our own unique window to look on into our life, to look at life, to also to look at ourselves and to look at our world. As I say, it's our personal window that we take with us everywhere we go. And that window that we have, whether you want to accept it or not, is not totally clear. It's clouded, it is smudged, it is smeared a bit from all the things that have happened during the course of our life to this point, all the events and circumstances and things from our birth, our childhood, various relationships we've had, happenings, events, perspectives that we've been given from various sources about life. And so if you add to that the fact that many of us have wounds that we carry, whether we're conscious or unconscious, whether we push them down or not and how far, we have a certain amount of pain of the past that is also smudging our window a bit as we look out. And so there are lots and lots of factors that figure in a distortion of our window and a distortion of and an inaccuracy of what we may be seeing in our world. And we have to face that and accept that. And part of our spiritual growth is to notice that, you see, and become aware of it and then make adjustments as well. Now, many a person is a spectator to life, and when we're meant to be experiencing life. And because of the smudges in the window and the various things that have gone on and the different pain and wounds, people step back from life and they can disengage in many ways, whether they're conscious of it or not. And so that again is something to realize, that there are things that have to do with the window we have looking into the world, at ourselves, at our world, at our life, at our God, what have you, that keep us from experiencing the fullness of life. We can have certain thoughts and ideas and beliefs and opinions that are also various forms of smears on the window. And these things serve basically as boundaries or the limits as to what we are going to see and experience of life. And so we can have, as I say, various judgments, we can have prejudices, and these can cloud our experience of other people and situations and things that we are meeting up with in life. And just to give you an example, there was a friend of mine, a colleague actually, that several years back had happened to him, and he shared it. And it was basically, he made a trip to the tire store. Okay, he was going to the tire store, and he was driving at the time a Mitsubishi Evolution, and it's a four-wheel drive, and it's a high-performance vehicle, and it's sometimes used in racing. It was at the time anyway. And he was pulling up to this tire store that he was having something fixed, and he looked and saw a mechanic there that was in, you know, a mechanic's outfit, and it was what he thought was like a 20-year-old young girl. And he thought, oh, gee, I hope I don't get her. And it was kind of a prejudicial thought, thinking that, you know, she was too young to know anything, and she was a woman, and I don't know if that meant she wouldn't know anything. I couldn't get into his consciousness, but anyway, he said that he caught himself in this thought, and he felt it, and then he was able to choose another thought about that, and chose to see the God in this person, and to see that there was something more than what he initially was seeing based on sort of the smudges. What we would say today would be the smudges and the cloudiness of his window. And so anyway, yes, as he drove in, got out of the car, that was the mechanic he got. And so in the end, he was very pleased because he found out that this girl, maybe she wasn't 20, whatever, she's a young girl, she was actually a race car driver, and she knew very well what she was working on for him because she happened to drive the same vehicle, okay? And so she was able to not only fix what he was coming in there for, but she was able to see a few other things and tweak them, things that he hadn't even thought of or would not have known if he didn't have somebody who was that knowledgeable. And so he got to know this person from that and really got to appreciate her, and also got to appreciate how valuable it is for us to step back and notice our cloudiness or some of the things that we smear the window of which we look into the world of others and life itself. And so the point is, we really don't experience what is there as long as we hold certain judgments or have things that are smearing our view on into the world if we don't really clear them up. And this type of thing can carry over into all aspects of our life, of course, the various ideas and beliefs and conclusions and opinions that we carry into any dynamic of life, whether it's related to any of our relationships, whether it's related to the work we have, our jobs, our careers, our religion, our marriage, our prosperity, healing, our in-laws, and God. Not that they go in together. Yes, they do. Anyway, today we want to look at, I think, the most important window that we look through, and that is really our window into God. And nothing is more important than that. The question is, what do we believe about God? What is it that we've been told? What is it that we've accepted? What is it that are the concepts and ideas that we build our life around a relationship with the divine? And as I say, it really matters to look at this. There's nothing more important, because whatever you believe and whatever you have created your God to be becomes the limits. You set the ceiling as to what God can actually be in your life. You understand? That God can only do for you what he can do through you, and therefore God can do only through your consciousness. To the degree that you let God in a big way, God can only be big, okay? And so that's a very important thing for us to realize. The truth is that the whole truth of God, the allness of God, is already established, but not our awareness of it. And so you and I are not fully living the whole truth of God in the fullness, the full reality. We vary depending on where we are in our own individual spiritual evolution and unfoldment. We know that God loves all of us, okay, wherever we may be in the process, and no matter where we are in our evolution spiritually. But God actually cannot be more until we open up to embracing the more that God is. And so that's part of our journey, is not to get stuck, okay, and to maintain a certain degree of openness to exploration and to the mystery of the divine. And there is something called the law of manifestation. And the law of manifestation says, as in mind, so in manifestation. And so what it is that you truly know and truly believe in your consciousness is what you will manifest in your life. That will be your reality. You can look around at your life if you want to know what it is that you truly know and believe, and that will give you an indication. And so this is true of our God, okay? What we truly know and believe about God is a big part of the extent to which we're able to experience God, okay? And those are the boundary lines, and to which God can show up in our lives. So the more of God has always been there, but we've been handed, to some degree, the lesser of God. Certainly not the allness. We've learned the less sometimes of God, and not the more. And therefore we've experienced, in some ways, the less of God rather than the more. Think about the spiritual masters and mystics and people who have walked this earth, certainly Jesus Christ and Buddha and Krishna and others that you may know of and have read about, and what they were able to accomplish, and the fact that they experienced more. How did they experience more? It was because they didn't get stuck in a concept that was less. Or was clouded in some way. They didn't allow the barriers of mind to deny them transcending that. And they were able to go beyond it. And there was that willingness. And so the divine essentially cannot be more until we open ourselves up to embracing the more that God is, all right? And so the journey never ends. There is no destination. You have to understand that in the journey of spiritual unfoldment, it's not that you land finally at a place. It continues on. In my Father's house are many mansions, many realms. You move from one room to the next, just as you graduate from kindergarten to first grade to, on through high school and graduate school. You just continue. And what it is an expanse. You continue to expand as you graduate into living the principles of the divine. Today we had that verse that's from Jesus where he said, "If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you will, and it shall be done for you." And so he was talking about, you have to abide in this expansiveness that I am offering you, and even beyond it. And so God doesn't change. But we have to do the changing. God is not evolving. We are the ones that are evolving. And we either experience the limits or the limitlessness of God. Now, what we could say actually here is that there are many gods, that your God is different from the God of the person sitting next to you. And that, in a sense, is true because we all have our own individual God consciousness. We all have our own filters, our own window through which we're looking into the world or looking at God, experiencing God, the degree of openness we are, all of the factors that have contributed to where we stand in our relationship to God that either limits or is limitlessness in regard to that divine. And so all of us have our own God, and in a sense we're all creating our own God. My God is not the same as yours. And so we can look at the world today and see truly that some of the wars and the conflicts and the extremism that goes on is that which is being acted out, varying concepts, some bizarre, some way far removed from the truth, of course. And so divisions exist in the world, and large bodies of the human race simply have differing God concepts and ideologies and dogma and what have you. In some regards, you look at the world and people are into my God is versus your God, okay? And it's sad, but it's true. And there's actually, one God, and it's the one true God that really brings us all together in love and binds us together as one. And so the truth universally is that we're all one, and love is what brings us all together. Now, some people have all kinds of issues from this life and even past lives that they bring in that are so conflict-bound, so pain-filled and wounded that all they know is conflict and violence, and it's most unfortunate. But there's a story in the Old Testament that about this idea of my God versus your God that some of you may recall or have read. It's in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 18, and it's a showdown between two different groups, gods, okay? And this is where Ahab is the king of Israel at this time, and Ahab has married Jezebel. And Jezebel historically was a worshiper of many gods and a worshiper of Baal. And so in the marriage, she brought along statues and idols and got her husband Ahab to start worshiping these idols and some of the people also in the kingdom. And as a result, Elijah was not happy about this. Elijah was the one, a prophet in that day, that tried to keep people on the mark. And so he comes sweeping in, and he says to them, how long will you go limping along with two different opinions? That's a good question for all of us, because we have differing opinions on God that we're being bombarded with all the time. And which is the one that we're going to grab? Which is the one we're going to live from? And so anyway, Elijah, he is one prophet. And he challenges the 450 prophets that represent the worshiping of these idols and Baal. And so he says, we will each offer up a bull on two separate piles of wood, and we won't light the fire. We'll call on our God to light the fire and see who comes. All right? Get the contest? All right, so we'll see who is God. And so Elijah made it very interesting. He built the altar and put the wood and put the offering on it, and then he dug a trench around the altar, and then he comes with all kinds of water and dumps 3 times buckets of water on the altar, on the wood, on the offering, so much so that the trench is filled up with water. Okay, so this is like Elijah said, I'm really going to make this a tough one for my God, but I believe he's capable. And so then the prophets of Baal started calling for their God to come and light their altar, which was without a trench and without water. But nobody came. And then finally, Elijah called on his God. And as the story goes, the fire came and it consumed the wood, and it consumed the animal offering, and it consumed the water, and everything. It just got swept up in the fire and the power of his God. Now, the story, we would say, the teaching in it is that there is only one God, and that's true, and that there are no others. And it is also about, look how great this God is, the true God, and what that God is capable of. And that one is not to worship idols and other statues and things. But on another level, it's also asking us who read that, so who is your God? Who is your God? That essentially we get bombarded with all kinds of different versions of God and thoughts and ideas about God. And that's part of our journey. We got to sort that all out, you know. Even today, there are lots of views of God. And there's this sense of your God and my God. And most people reading that story would say, I don't really believe that happened. You know, that was just an exaggeration. It was a biblical story, you know. But the truth is, Elijah was a person that represented the divine, and he had his creation of God, his understanding of God, which was broad, and that therefore his God was capable of that. And therefore I believe that that really happened, because that God is capable of, I mean, there are amazing stories of what the divine has done and is capable of doing and has demonstrated. And therefore, I believe because his God and the design of his God had the capacity and the capability of doing that, it did it. And that's where he started from, and that's where he ended from. And it's a lesson to us to be willing to evolve into a broader God. And the design of your God is the extent to which the God will show up. You set the boundaries, you set the limits, you set the ceiling, and Elijah demonstrated that his was well beyond anyone else's. And so we know that the scriptures are always, you know, reflect the idea of evolution. You look at the Old Testament, and there is a God there that is introduced to us as being vengeful, punishing, jealous, fearful God, one to be afraid of, and all that. And then you get to the New Testament, you have Jesus, who is introducing unconditional love and forgiveness, and introducing that. And so our concepts of God can vary. And there's some people have a God that is outside them still, God that's off in the heavens, separate and apart, and you really don't get to know, see, meet, or experience God until after you die. A lot of people are brought up on that, okay? And someone has said that's like kissing through glass. I don't know if that's true, but it's funny to me. Other people, you know, they believe that God is inside of us and outside and everywhere, and we can feel and experience God along the way. Matthew Fox, who was a great writer, some of you are familiar with his books and writings, he once said or wrote, he said, thinking about God is no substitute for tasting God. Thinking about God is no substitute for tasting God. And he said, and talking about God is no substitute for giving people ways of experiencing God. It's all in the experience. You can never argue with an experience that a person has had, you know. And so we can't get lost in our head with concepts alone. We have to make the journey to our heart and open to an experience of feeling the divine moving through us and expanding that. So the idea is to evolve in your experience of God and to expand certainly your beliefs and concepts, because we all have concepts, and push the boundaries of them. And so the things that sometimes we can't see exist, dimensions of God. There's subatomic particles, there's atoms and molecules and cells and so forth that you can, science has now proven to us. And now there are telescopes that see off into space, and you can see planets way beyond planets and star systems and galaxies and all of that. And so we realize that God infuses everything, and that the reality of God transcends all that we could possibly know, experience, or even imagine. But science has helped us to uncover more of God, so to speak. And Carl Sagan, he is quoted to say, science is, at least in part, informed worship. It's informed worship. So God is bigger than any person, or bigger than a someone or something. It is the seen and the unseen. It's the mystery. And so all of us, the job that we have is to begin to clean the windows. It's kind of like the Karate Kid, and we have to, there's some work to be done. And then it helps us. There's some things some schmear to clear, so that we unlearn some things that are limiting us and put boundaries around the divine. There's one life, and we are all related to that one life. God is in the tree, in the flower, in each of us, and in everything. It was Teilhard de Chardin that said, he was the famous Catholic paleontologist, Teilhard de Chardin. He said, evolution is a light illuminating all facts, okay? A curve that all lines must follow. And so the facts change, it was once thought that the world was flat, but obviously it isn't. And so facts change, and you have to go beyond. And the light of evolution illumines us to facts being not necessarily true, and we have to transcend them at times. There was a guy named Marlon Lavenar, and I believe he was said to be a scientist, and he said this. He said, we have all heard some fundamentalist-minded person say something like, don't tell me I'm related to monkeys. And he went on to say, the fact of the matter is that now that we have discovered DNA and its code, we know that we are not only related to monkeys, we are related to zucchini. So let's get over it. He's saying all life is really God. God is alive in the rocks, you see, and that's what he's saying. Get over it. And so sometimes we have internal conflicts as to what we have been given to learn. I remember as a little boy, I was just filled with the church that I went to. It was always about the devil and always about hell. And I chose as a little boy even not to be afraid of either one. And I actually even reasoned as a child that if God was love, God would not ever send any of his children to eternal punishment. Just didn't make sense to me. And if a human loving father could not do that, how much more was the love of God that could not do that? And so later, of course, I got to see the theology of how certain concepts were built into religion and oftentimes used to frighten people into a relationship with God as opposed to inspiring them into God. And so you should always trust the inner authority of the voice of the divine that is speaking to you, telling you the truth of who you are and who you're meant to be in this world. And so what we need to do is expand our understanding, expand our beliefs into a true experience of the divine. We need to clean the windows. It's our job. There's a Sanskrit word which is daktla padavina. And what it means is the divine is dependent on the devotee. You get that? It's saying in Sanskrit, ancient writings, that God can only be what the devotee is open and receptive to that God being through him or her. And so we have to be willing to move past our smallness and the limits that we have put on the divine and to expand into a greater experience of the divine. I have some homework to give to you. realizing that relationships are what life is about, and your relationship with God is the most important thing that you can have. And I recommend that whatever is the best relationship you've ever had in the world in this life, or you want to create what that would be, make God that relationship, or the very best friend that you've ever had, that is always there, always ready to help, always ready to assist in every way, and somebody that you can rely on, that is supportive. You can never make or do anything where the love would not keep flowing. There's a forgiveness, there's a willingness to talk, to guide, to help, to assist, to be there in every way. That's a great friend, and that's the way God is, and that's the way God wants to be in your life, and that's the truth. And so one of the assignments is to look at and get a piece of paper and write down all the things, ask prayerfully to have revealed to you the limitations you have placed on God. They may be sort of unconscious, so you have to ask that some of the unconscious be brought to the surface and write them down. Then get another piece of paper and spend another half an hour writing down the God you want your God to be. Design your God. That's not inappropriate at all. God wants to be told how you want God to be in your life, all right? Over and over, the scriptures say, ask, ask, ask. Ask and shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. But please ask. Please tell me how I can show up in your life. That in any relationship is important. And it's true of God. There is actually a human element to the divine in terms of being able to operate in your life and to show up. Albert Einstein, had some definite thoughts about God. And he said, and wrote, the most beautiful and most profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. It is the power of all true science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. That deeply emotional conviction of the presence of a superior reasoning power which is revealed in the incomprehensible universe forms my idea of God. I went to India. I've never had mystical experiences like I did there. All right, so they were new to me, and I don't know why. I haven't put them together into what that was all about, but it was like something opened up, and I had 3 that were amazing for me. We're not looking and digging for mystical experiences. We start where we are. They just came to me, and that's the way it is. And I'm grateful for it, but it was the something more. If God was a strawberry, which God is, if God was a strawberry, would you be most inclined to point at it, to analyze it, to try and describe it, or would you taste it? Expand your view of the divine, and then taste and experience that God that loves you so much. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. At Unity, we believe that God's presence of love and goodness is everywhere, and that life is meant to be good. You can find out more about Unity and our teachings at unityhouston.org.
Hi, I'm Howard Caesar, and I'd like to invite you to join us on Sunday, September 21st for National Back to Church Sunday. As you know, we're a non-denominational church. We honor all paths. We embrace all people. We teach universal spiritual principles that are positive, practical, and progressive. Many a person that has found Unity has said it felt like coming home spiritually. And so we invite you to invite your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, bring your family. We have a wonderful youth ed program that meets at 9 and 11. And so Back to Church Sunday, September 21st. Hope to see you there.